Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Chad Hyams here with you today, and I'm going to be doing this interview on my own. Now, usually one of my cohorts joins me for these interviews, yet I think they both had excuses, and I'm putting air quotes around that for those of you who are listening. They had excuses to miss this one. Yeah, our founder Ben and then Bob both managed to come up with some reason not to join me because of today's guest, I think. So Nick, I'm going to introduce you in a second and let you introduce yourself, yet I think without even showing up, you've already scared some people off. And it's because, folks, we're going to have a conversation today that's not going to be just about business, although, boy, it will be about business. And we're going to have a conversation today that's not going to talk about your mindset, but, oh boy, we're going to talk about mindset. Yet all of it, as you learn about Nick Shaw, my guest on today's episode, you're going to find out his business is in a fitness-based world. So yes, folks, for those of you who have been waiting for an episode to attack this topic, health will be discussed today. And because of that, Nick, you've scared off Ben and Bob already. So thanks for joining us and just letting you and I have a one-on-one conversation. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. Maybe a bummer, but that tends to happen when it comes to health and fitness. Can kind of easily scare people off. So good to know, I suppose. But hopefully they'll listen and get a lot out of it. I would think. So here we are, and yeah, ready to go, man.
All right. Well, I know that they'll listen. I know they just didn't want to get called out and on the spot any more than I can call them out right now. And I call them out on almost every episode on it, and I get yelled at for it. Yet one of these days it'll kick in. And Nick, before we go any farther, I just want to have you introduce yourself, because I always love to have our guests introduce themselves, because they mention their introduction about the things that matter to them. They mention in their introduction the things that are important. So Nick, tell our audience, who is Nick Shaw?
So I am the founder, a co-founder and CEO of Renaissance Periodization. That's a really long name. I know. We go by RP Strength on social media. Kind of quickly realized that, I can barely spell Renaissance Periodization. So expecting others to do it's probably not super practical. So we go by RP Strength. And really, we started, I'd be lying if I said, hey, we always thought that we were going to take off and do really well. That just wasn't the case. It was a passion thing. Honestly, I went to school at the University of Michigan, undergraduate, and I met Dr. Mike Israetel, who's a co-founder of RP with me. No joke, we met in the weight room at Michigan, so can't even make that up. And we were really, really passionate about lifting, about eating well, all that good stuff. And it led us to New York City, where we were personal trainers. And eventually we were just like, you know what? This whole personal training thing, it's cool, but it's probably just not the best use of our time. And, it was one of these realizations where I was traveling all over New York City, training people in person for an hour, maybe making, these are Manhattan rates. So let's call it $100 an hour. Nice round number.
All right.
And it was just basically like, hey, this is not a good use of my time. I have to take the subway all over, I got to walk all over the city, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were like, well, I think we can scale this into an online company. And so we did. And, here we are about 8 years later. And now we've sort of morphed into a technology company, because now we run a nutrition coaching app, which is our top seller. It's really our main thing. We've got a team of developers that work for us. They're all awesome. They do a really great job. And, the app's made it into the top 10 before on Apple and Google. So it's doing really well. And it's kind of one of these things where we look back and it's like, that's pretty cool for just a couple guys who really liked fitness. And, here we are. I probably met my buddy 13 years ago. We officially started the company about 8 years ago. So here we are.
Wow. All right, so there's a lot to pick up in there. And the first thing I heard that I'm just going to jump right on, because it's already a similarity to our founder, Ben Kinney. He was a real estate agent and then turned it into a technology company because he built tools that were needed that leveraged his time. And now all of a sudden he's got multiple tech companies. So it's really interesting. In today's world, it doesn't matter whether it's health, whether it's sales, whether it's oh, I don't know, your hobby at home, maybe woodworking or sewing or whatever. Everything can be turned into a technology business and an online product in today's world. Would you agree with that?
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, as you can probably imagine, I know you said you're pretty into health and fitness, but that whole sector is just blowing up recently. And
Yeah.
then you mention everything that's gone on this year in 2020, coronavirus, all of that. Well, now, people are at home more. A lot of people have gained some weight because they can't go to the gyms. Gyms are closed. So you're seeing an even bigger spike and rise in online fitness. So, I was definitely really worried back in March when everything hit. And we've been uniquely positioned to do really well through it all. And knock on wood, super super fortunate and blessed that we haven't really been impacted, because we're really unique in that we've got probably almost 50 people that in some capacity work for RP, and we all work remotely. We were already doing that,
Mm.
so we didn't have an office space. We got people all over the country, 25, 30 different coaches all over the country, wherever, anywhere, basically you can think of. We have people in the U.S., and so here we are setting pretty well, and again, just super blessed and fortunate. I know a lot of people out there are really struggling, so definitely can empathize with that, and just really feeling pretty blessed with everything.
Yeah, and a lot of our listeners are probably in, well, I'm not going to say a lot of our listeners. There's a chunk of our listeners that are in that boat. And we know about the freshman 10. It used to be the freshman 5. I guess we've gotten worse as everyone's gotten older. Now it's the freshman 10 that they put on. Ben jokes about it's the COVID-19 that
Yeah.
he's added for himself. Yet we know that health is going to be one of those key things to drive everybody through this. So we will be discussing health on this. Yet we're also going to discuss, you already mentioned, you took a business that was a one-on-one. You had only limited use of your time. There's only so many hours in a day, including the travel. And in Manhattan, that's crazy. And then it was, you only got paid for the time you were face to face with someone. And you took a business like that and scaled it into this massive tech organization. Yet let's go back. Let's go back to before it even began. You said you met your partner in the gym. I mean, that's where your co-founder and you met. You were in the gym. Was that just always a thing for you, Nick? Were you the kid that grew up and as soon as you could start lifting things, you started lifting things, or was there some life moment or some thing that happened that all of a sudden said, "Me, gym, here we go"?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question, I guess. I think it's pretty stereotypical in that I had a brother who was 4 years older than me, and so he would be training for high school sports, and here I am, I don't know, not even quite in middle school, and just seeing that, and I was like, "Yep, well, I'm going to naturally do that because my big brother's doing it." So that's how I literally got started, and then it's really funny because people usually look at me now, and they're like, well, you obviously played football in high school. And I'm like, I got to be honest, I was a runner in high school. In fact, I was a distance runner. So it's kind of one of these things where I just always liked working out in some capacity. And I like the idea of it because you can always get better, right? There's not a time where you can't focus on getting better on something. You can get faster, you can get stronger, you can build more muscle, whatever it is in fitness, you can always do a little bit more of. So that's kind of always been the draw for me. And then I don't want to say by accident, but I stumbled upon this really unique idea. You let me know how unique you think it is. But we were told one summer cross country, like, hey, go run 100 miles this summer before we start back fall practice.
I
And
hope
I
they
did.
didn't mean 100 miles at once.
No, yeah. No.
Okay,
Good
good.
catch. Yeah. Most certainly not. I would not have made that. But they're like, hey, you basically have 3 months over the summer, like go run 100 miles. I said, oh, okay. And I did it. Well, I was told to do something. I'm going to do it naturally. And, we come back day one of fall practice. This is like my sophomore year. And I didn't even make the varsity team. I go to a small school. So it's like, that's really unimpressive. And this is my freshman year. And so I do what I'm told. I come back. And then I'm running with the top guys from the year before. And I was like, well, this is really interesting because no one else had done the work. And so I go, well, you know what? This is really interesting. if I just outwork other people, even though they're probably more talented than I am, I can probably do pretty well for myself. That was the first light bulb moment. And that's when I really, to be honest, got hooked in sort of all things fitness and was always obsessed with running. And then it got into lifting and all that. And so it's just kind of, I guess, always been there since, high school, 14, 15, 16.
All right, everybody, hear the lesson. Do the work. Right? We've mentioned that in different words many times. You've heard that in your life many times. And here Nick's just telling you, do the work. So whether it's making a certain number of calls, whether it's reading a certain number of books, whether it's whatever you're working towards, you got to do the work and make it simple. Nick, in my brain, you just said run 100 miles over about 3 months. Well, my brain just quickly did the math and said, well, that's a mile a day. And a few of the days I got to go 2 miles. I mean, that's really it. If you're doing it over 3 months, you get about 90 days in there. Folks, take a quarter. Take the next month that's starting and just say for the next 3 months, I'm going to run a mile every single day. And if I miss a day, okay, I got to run 2 miles the next day to make it up. You're going to be a completely transformed person at the end of 90 days if you just do that. Wouldn't you agree, Nick?
For sure. And that goes with anything, really. So a lot of people are sort of intimidated by the idea of, starting a nutrition plan. Well, boy, you don't have to dive into the deep end. Start in the shallow end. Start with, maybe removing, your daily trip to the Starbucks where you get, triple caramel espresso, whatever. I'm not a big coffee guy, so I'm just making that up. It's like, well, right there, you're knocking out several hundred calories. Or like maybe give up, soda. I don't know, people can give up soda and a couple of months later, they're down 10, 15 pounds. It's really that easy.
Folks, hear that. Stop it. Those of you drinking a soda right now while you're hearing this, start carrying a bottle of water and just drink enough water every day and replace the soda. You'll be amazed the change that's coming.
Yeah, totally. It doesn't have to be these super huge things. Or, if you're someone that likes to stop by the fast food restaurant on the way home, you can make a really simple change just by trying to eat a little bit higher quality foods. Nothing super crazy or drastic, just a little change like that. Do that for a couple months. You start to just become more aware of what you're eating then. And then maybe you advance to, like the middle of the pool, not even the deep end yet. You just sort of start to build like that. Chad, I got to believe that that's probably what you tell folks all the time if they're looking to get into whatever business or real estate. I mean, you don't dive in. You're not a pro at the beginning. You start somewhere small.
Sure. Yeah, you're in classes, whatever your job, your career. Heck, even if you're a student, we go to school, and how many of us think we know what we're going to be when we grow up and then end up changing what we're working on? It's very few people that go in and stick to a full plan. It's you're taking a lot of classes that are helping you change. Another thing I love that you mentioned about fitness and health in general, Nick, was that you can beat yourself every day. Yep. Like you had that mindset, and talk about that a little bit, that every day you could go into the gym and say, I'm just going to do one more, or I'm just going to do 5 pounds more, or I'm just going to, and every day you could truly compete against yourself, which is the only person you should truly ever be competing with, and you can progress. Talk about that concept a little bit that you were mentioning in there about that progression and that mindset of just going again and again and again for the constant improvement.
Yeah, so having a growth mindset basically where that if you work hard, if you set out to improve yourself, now there's obviously various ways to go about that, and you can do it a little bit more intelligently in certain ways versus other ways. But it's just the mindset of knowing that if you put in the work, you're going to get better, and you can keep getting better because you are doing that work, and what you are doing matters. So it's not, the sort of the growth versus fixed mindset where a lot of people, if they have a fixed mindset, they think that no matter what they do, they can't get better. That's just not the case. And if you truly put work into something and really commit for, weeks and months, it's like a lot of people get thrown off and they think that they have to go from 0 to 100. It's literally the same analogy that we talked about with the shallow end, deep end of the pool. It's like, that's not the case. You just start small. You said run a mile a day for 3 months. I was even going to say, what if you start by walking a mile a day?
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't have to be super crazy, especially if you're someone that's not into fitness. You don't have to start by training for a marathon, although, some people love to do that. It's a really, really interesting mindset approach here. Some people need these just really huge goals to start off with. And I totally get that idea and concept. However, when you have these huge goals right from the start, if you if you basically set yourself up for failure because your goals are too big, so basically what you got to do is you got to chunk them into smaller goals. So if you start off saying, I need to lose 30 pounds or I need to run a marathon next month, well, that's not super realistic. But if you say, hey, you know what? I listened to that podcast and Chad said, I'm going to run a mile every day. So I'm going to aim for 20, 30 miles this month to run. Well, that's a heck of a lot easier than running 26.2 miles in one day in a marathon. So you kind of hopefully set yourself up with realistic goals, and just little by little, you keep knocking them off each day or each week. You keep building positive momentum and reaching those. All of a sudden, 30 days from now, you're like, wow, I can run a couple miles at a time now. Or, something like that. People, I think, get caught up in that they have to do so much so fast in instant gratification society, but it's like that's not really the case. And if you sort of think more long term versus short term, you're going to be a lot better off.
Okay, so talk about that even a little bit more for us, Nick, because while we might be using the health analogies, we're talking fitness here. This is business as well. This is your relationship. This is your parenting, whatever that situation. It works in all of them. How do you? Because everybody can wake up and find the motivation for the next 24 hours to do something. But how do you find that motivation to do something more long term, to turn it into a part of your routine or part of your habit? How do you take a goal that's massive and then break it down to those small bits? Walk us through that in any part of our life.
Yeah, so I'm going to say something that I think a lot of people falsely assume. They think that you need to be motivated every single day. That is not the case. Nobody, I'm telling you, nobody is motivated all the time. That does not exist. I've been
Say that
fortunate.
again. I got to just catch up. Say that again for everybody listening so they don't even have to push the back 10-second button to hear that again.
Nobody, literally nobody, is motivated all the time. And I've had the pleasure to work with like some of the best athletes in the world, like CrossFit Games Champions, some like Navy SEAL types. They're not motivated every single day. Now, the key is when you do get some inspiration, you do get some motivation, you choose to take action and get started. And then hopefully, what you're able to do is over time, you stick with it. And then the discipline starts to replace that motivation. Because guess what? I would be lying if I said I enjoy, waking up every day and doing some cardio and, lifting weights. Boy, there's days I don't want to do that stuff. And, maybe every now and again I'll, skip one. And some people think, well, like you're like the fitness pro. You can't do that. Man, I'm human. I don't know anyone that's not human. I wish that I was a robot. I wish that I could, have this infinite willpower or whatever, but that doesn't exist. And so a lot of people get thrown off. Again, it goes back to these, wrong assumptions or whatever, but approach it from the mindset of that you're not always going to be motivated. You have to build into place the habits over time. And it's not easy to do that, right? Like, I don't care who you are, trying to change things, whether it's business, whether it's fitness. I'll give you an example. I used to not brush no, I always brush my teeth, but I used to not floss, is what I should say. And my wife always did. And I would go to the dentist and it wasn't enjoyable. I didn't like going to the dentist. I was like, man, I really don't want to go. And then I literally just set out. I was like, you know what? This sucks. It's time to change. There was my inspiration. And I set like a reminder in my phone every single night. Hey, make sure you floss your teeth before bed. I got like a electric toothbrush, and then I just started out and I did it. I consistently did it. Now here we are a couple years later. I literally do that every single day. I go to the dentist, every 6 months. It is the easiest thing in the world now. They're like, wow, you take such great care of your teeth. Like, what's your secret? I'm like, well, I finally listened to you guys, and I just was consistent with, flossing every day and, using that, silly whatever electric toothbrush twice a day. And they're like, oh, well, there you have it.
Well, you did the work.
Yeah. Oh, for
Right.
sure.
Flossing doesn't sound like work, yet I know exactly what you're talking about because that's the same thing. My wife was a flosser. I hate going to the dentist. And the dentist said, look, you could come more often. And I said, and they said, or you could floss better. And now it's a nightly thing. Did the work because the inspiration was there. So the inspiration can show up from anywhere. And sometimes, would you agree that it has to show up from inside ourselves even?
Yeah, totally.
There wasn't an inspiration for you to build Renaissance periodization. It's a huge word that would be difficult to spell all day long for me. Yet there wasn't some outside external force inspiration that said, build this and scale this as a business. That had to come from within in that situation.
Yeah, I guess I've sort of always liked working for myself. I did a college internship once where I was kind of like a accidental entrepreneur and did pretty well. And then, I got into the real world after college and was working at a gym in Manhattan. And they basically just treated everyone like crap. And I started thinking, I'm not really sure why I'm working here. I could probably, yeah, I might not have as many clients, but if I just go out on my own and let's say have half as many, but I can charge more and I don't have to, give 75% or whatever that the gym would take and we would get the other part. It's like, well, I can basically flip that. I can keep 75% for myself, only give 25% to, an independent gym that charges you a small fee. And boy, I did that and that was pretty cool. And sort of over time, I was like, yeah, I don't really love doing all this stuff in person. I mean, you know how that goes. Like, you have some good clients, maybe some that aren't as good. And it wasn't very efficient. Had a kid in Manhattan. My wife and I were living there in an apartment, just traveling all over. It just wasn't super great from a time standpoint. And then my buddy was doing some online coaching, so he was going to get his PhD, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm in school. I can't keep up with all these clients. Can you take some?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, no one knows this stuff better than your stuff better than myself because we had been sort of practicing all this on ourselves for years and years and on close friends and family." So he said, all right, well, let's do this. And so we started and we're like, yeah, well, let's just make a company out of it. And there we go. Then we got into online coaching. And again, long story short, here we are 8 years later.
Right. All right. So day in, day out, we're not necessarily going to be motivated every day. What do you do on a day you're not? I mean, when you wake up and you have one of those mornings or whatever it is, bad night's sleep, or what, you just wake up and don't feel, how do you get through a day like that when the world's expecting you to be motivated every day?
Yeah, that's a great one. Every single person needs to hear this because it's the most basic concept in the world. Just take that first step. You just get moving. And so, I've asked all of our top athletes at RP, I've asked them the same question. I said, what do you do on the days that you don't want to get going? You don't want to go train, but you have to. They said, well, we just go and get started. Because, a lot of times you just don't feel like it. But just take that first step. Just get going a little bit. What happens once you start exercising a little bit? Well, I'm going to almost guarantee you start feeling a lot better. You get those endorphins going, blood circulating, you just start feeling good. And then half hour later when you're done, you're not thinking, boy, that was a mistake. You're like, wow, I'm really glad that I did that. And that just kind of helps build the habit over time. You just keep doing that repeatedly, even when you don't necessarily want to. The discipline takes over and you say, well, yeah, I could sit here and watch another show on Netflix or another silly YouTube video, but guess what? I'm gonna go walk on my treadmill or go for a little run. And hey, well, while you're doing that, maybe throw in a podcast or an audiobook, something that you like doing. I'll give you another example. So I can't take credit for this one. I was talking with my buddy. We were kind of going over our daily routines. And he's like, yeah, each night I wash the dishes. He's like, I put in my headphones and I listen to an audiobook or a podcast. I said, my God, that's genius. So now, what's the most common complaint in relationships? Usually it's like dishes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, now I wake up early or whatever, after I do my normal stuff, put in my headphones, click on a podcast or an audiobook, take 5 or 10 minutes, because no one likes doing dishes, right? Nobody.
Sure. I'm sure there's somebody out there that likes doing dishes, yet, yeah, they're probably not listening right now. They're doing dishes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's always someone. But I said, well, I'm just going to make this little tweak where now I've added something that I like doing, listening to a podcast or audiobook, whatever it is. Maybe it's a YouTube video. Who cares? Well, now I kind of like doing the dishes. I've been doing that for, a little bit of time now. And it's like, now I kind of look forward to it. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go do that for 5 or 10 minutes. It's not hard work, but again, you just got to do the work. And
Right.
now I've just added something that I actually enjoy to it. So now it's a win-win.
There you go. Love it. And we get pictures all the time. People send me pictures or post in our Facebook group for the Win, Make, Give podcast. They'll post pictures of themselves out for their walk while listening to the podcast. They're like, hey, I might as well listen while I'm out doing this walk and getting myself moving and all of that. So the things that you're talking about, though, that again, we might be using health, folks, in this example, yet you can use anything. So Nick saying, get up and just start walking, or just start doing the exercising because you need to do it and you need to do it. And even though you're not motivated to do it, just do it anyway because you got to do the work. And then what's going to happen is you're going to feel good about it at the end, which is only going to be a positive reinforcement to yourself. That could be the same thing, Nick, if I'm in sales, pick up that phone and make that first phone call. If it's something with my relationship, it's okay. What's that thing I need to do every morning to start the relationship on the right foot, or whatever these things are to make sure you're saying just do it anyway. Do the work, whether you want to or not.
There's no way around it. At the end of the day, what do successful people have in common? They just do the work.
Okay.
It's
So
really
they just do the work. Folks, don't miss that message, right? Just do the work. All right, so let's flip this a little bit, and we're going to come back to health conversation. So folks, don't worry, stick with us. We'll come back, and we're going to get Nick to give you a few tips, maybe on some of that nutrition and some of that health stuff as we keep going into the episode, so that other than giving up soda, we got 1 or 2 more tips that'll probably come to you, I'm sure. But Nick, let's look at the business side of all of this, because, not only did you have a health world, you created a health business. You turned what was a passion to you and you grew this. So everybody out there wants their business to be bigger. You say nobody likes to wash dishes, and I'm sure there's the exception to the rule. Yet I can say that everybody wants their business to be bigger. And I guess there's the person who says, I don't want it bigger because I can't handle it bigger. Yet that's just because they don't know all the lessons on how to grow a bigger business. And there's many ways to do it, right? Let's talk about scaling business. Let's talk about, from your perspective and your business, how did you then grow this business to become a $1 million business, to become this huge product that you have built from something that, boy, there are thousands of coaches out there. In many towns, you can't, throw a football and not hit a nutrition or a personal trainer or coach or something like that. How did you scale this business to such a level?
Yeah, real quick. So I just want to touch on that point that you just made. There are so many coaches out there nowadays. So one, I think when we first got into this, it's like 2012, Instagram was barely a thing back then. So we I think maybe we're on the early side of riding the Instagram wave. And now it's great for fitness folks, for sure. And you see a ton of it. So we were always built on the idea that, all of our coaches are either PhDs or registered dietitians. So one way that you can stand out from the crowd is that you can walk the walk and talk the talk. So if you are into fitness, you're into sports, whatever, competing, whatever it is that you want to, and you have a PhD in a nutrition or sport related field, you can't get better than that. You literally can't get better than that. So that's what we've always been built around, is just the foundation of evidence-based practices. So we're not into fads. We're not into gimmicks. We're not here to sell you some magical detox thing that's going to get you in the best shape of your life, in 3 days or 7 days or 14 days. That's bullshit. You got to
do the work, right?
Exactly. And you said that I could maybe swear a little bit. So
that's it. Go for it. That's all right.
I will get passionate there. So for folks listening, you're going to see all this crap marketed online, and they're going to promise you the world. Get the lose belly fat. I hate that term belly fat. It's just literally, it's basically like an SEO term that like you put that in something and apparently folks just light up. I don't like that term. I don't think we've ever used that in any of our marketing because it's basically just trying to lure people in with the premise that it's going to be easy to lose fat. That's not the case. I mean, how do you build a business? Well, you got to work really hard. How do you get in shape? How do you get six pack abs? Well, you got to work really hard. It's not a coincidence. I've kind of always jokingly said that, everyone wants to be a millionaire. Everyone wants six pack abs until you tell them what it takes to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Then, let's say you got a line of 1 million people that want both. Then you tell them how much work's required. You tell them all the trade-offs and you tell them all the long hours and just all the crap you've had to deal with over the years. Now, all of a sudden, that line that was 1 million is, maybe down to, 100,000 people or something like that. And so it's like, that's a real wake-up call. But anyway, so that's part of it. You got to
So don't fall for the magic bullet is what you're telling us. Because in every industry, every world, whether it's nutrition, which is, of course, we always prey on people's self-image and self-confidence and stuff. Yet in sales, in parent, be the best parent ever. Have your kids be the most brilliant person. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They're always going to be those magic bullet programs out there. And what you're saying is just stop it. You've got to we're going to just keep coming back to this message, right? You've got to do the work, and it never is an overnight thing.
Here is the secret to success.
Okay, everybody stop, pull over, take notes. We've been waiting for it. Here it comes. Go for it, Nick.
Yeah, no, for sure. So here's the secret to success. And the sooner people realize this, the sooner they will actually get to their goals. It's when you stop chasing these BS scams that promise these miracle results. The sooner you stop doing that, and the sooner you just get down to doing the actual work, the sooner you will reach your level of success or your goals. Okay. That's it. Stop chasing all that bullshit. Put your head down and get to work. There you go.
Okay, folks, make a note of it right here in the episode. If you need to pull this clip out and hear it every morning, that might be the thing that gets you started on whatever it is you're working on that day. You don't have the motivation? That's okay. Let Nick give it to you right there with that message.
Yeah, totally. So I guess that was a long-winded way of when you were asking about scaling. So that's kind of the one way in which we stand out. But this goes back to being a personal trainer. So I started doing some online coaching and I was like, hey, this is really cool. Instead of, taking a half hour to travel downtown and then training someone for an hour or maybe 2 clients in a row, and then having to come all the way back up. And it's like, well, maybe you make a little bit of money doing that. It's like, well, boy, I can write, 5 or 10 programs for people in an hour while sitting at home. And I was like, wow, this is how you scale. And so I shifted from 100% in person, 0% online, maybe more like 50-50. And then over the years, this was the early years, 2012, 2013, 2014, well, gradually shifted to basically 100% online, 0% in person. I was like, well, this is something. I think we're onto something here. And then, so we knew we had this really good philosophy that worked and it was evidence-based. And, we had my colleague, he was a PhD, writing all of our books and programs. And so we came out with our first digital product in October of 2014. And this was like probably the second eye opener for me. The first one was kind of getting out of in-person stuff. And, we sold like 1,000 copies of our first book in like the first week. And I said, holy crap, this is where we need to go. Like we need to pivot. We need to like somehow find, some way to kind of scale the coaching model even more. Because even with online coaching, let's say I have 100 clients, which is a lot, by the way. Well, how can we take this model and how can we package it into like a product? And that way, instead of working with 100 people, maybe we can work with 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. So, I'm not the brains of the operation. So my colleague was like, hey, I think I got a pretty good idea. He made these Excel files. Chad, I'm telling you, we sold Excel files in 2015. We called them diet templates. They didn't look good. They weren't even pretty, but they worked. So rule number 1, we got people results and they worked. So we released those in early 2015. And about 3 months later is when they really started to take off because instead of paying, let's say, $500 for 3 months of diet coaching, you buy a template for $100. Well, that seems like a pretty good deal. And then people started posting about their results online. So about 3 months later, people are like, "Hey, I just used these, RP diet templates." People are like, "What? Like, how much were they?" Like $100. And like, versus, 100. Like some, nutrition coach is going to routinely charge more than $100 a month. So now
Sure.
you have something that's like that cost, and you can use for 3 to 6 months. Well, then it gets on social media. People get talking. People tag us, and that's kind of when it really started to grow pretty quick from there. And then over the years, we sort of updated them a little bit and eventually launched an app. Just kind of the natural progression. The best analogy there with like templates to app was uh, sort of a paper map versus GPS.
Mm.
So we
Yep.
had we had these templates. You had to print them off, and we eventually made them into PDF, so they were maybe a little nicer or whatever. But it's like having a paper map. All the information's there, but you still got to figure out the right route that you want to take. And here's the problem with paper maps. Well, what if there's construction or something? The map's not going to tell you that. So basically, what we did was we built essentially the idea of AI coaching into our app. So you go in, you enter in like, hey, how much weight you want to lose, what your weight is currently, your schedule, how much you work out, et cetera, et cetera. And then the app literally tells you how much food to eat at every single meal. All you have to do is pick your own foods. So it's kind of simplifying the process about as much as you can.
That sounds pretty good. So what I'm hearing in there is one, simplify right there at the end. Whatever it is that you're out there attempting to scale is how can you make it simple? Because that just makes scaling easier. Two, it doesn't have to look pretty because at the beginning you were selling something that you just said it didn't look pretty. So it doesn't have to be perfected before you start to sell it. You can
Mhm.
perfect it on your own. And then I heard in there a lot of reviews, a lot of feedback from the community. Obviously, in the health world, that as you mentioned, that's a common thing to see people want to post before and after pictures. Yet, whatever it is that you're doing, making sure that you're using the voice that is social media and having people give those testimonials, because that third party testimonial, as we talked back in our influence and persuasion series, is going to help you become the expert in the eyes of other people through all that stuff. So you covered a lot in all of that, Nick, for scaling, which is amazing, and everybody can do it. Some people are like, well, I can't scale my business. My business is one-on-one. It'll always be one-on-one. There are ways around it. And boy, in today's world that we're living in, hasn't it become just that much more acceptable when your business has gone completely virtual? I mean, you guys did it before where we are now, but
Mhm.
how many coaches have gone completely virtual now in your world, for example? The numbers are outstanding with the shift of what's happened out there, and everybody can take advantage and scale some of their business into the technology world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you're someone out there that says, well, I'm always going to be one on one, okay. I mean, that might be the case. And hey, I totally get it. If you would ask me 5 years ago, well, 6, 7 years ago, whatever, I probably would have been totally fine. Like, because you can do pretty well just doing one on one coaching. But to that person, I would say, why don't you, maybe think about, making a webinar or something and you record it once and you give away a lot of information, but then you can probably start to somehow charge for it, make a little money, or, maybe make a mini ebook or something. And it's like, there's various ways around it for sure. You just got to be a little bit creative, and it definitely works. And there are, especially now, coronavirus, man, it's sort of being forced upon people that you have to get more creative. Because if you were a trainer, I mean, your livelihood was shut off overnight. I mean, I live in North Carolina. Our gyms are still closed.
Sure. Yeah, same thing over here. We're in that, I think 5 people are allowed in a gym at a time to stay on that. And then for salespeople, we often talk about sales. I mean, real estate people, they're selling one house to one person, or car sales, you're selling a car to a person. But you're right, there are ways you could easily line those people up by creating those a webinar, a series of whatever, where you're giving away some great value to people. Now all of a sudden people are calling you. Now people are lining up. Now you can scale that business by building an organization. Maybe you've got people helping make it happen. Maybe you've got a team. You're not the one doing all of it anymore. Now you said you've got a staff of many people that are helping you that are scattered across the country. So, Nick, let's talk about it. We just really said coronavirus, and we talked about what's going on there, and we won't get into the specifics of, yet we can consider this a challenging time, right? This is not normal. I mean, parents are having to figure out how to work and help their kids go to school from at home, or gyms are closed for the people that are healthy and say, well, now that I can't get into my gym, my health has suffered because I'm not motivated enough or don't have the equipment on my own. Whatever it is, we are in a challenging time. How do you stay positive, Nick, through this challenging time? How do you keep that positive mindset?
Yeah. Fortunately for me, I've done a lot of reading over the last kind of, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, kind of about the role that a positive mindset plays. And I think it can't be overlooked because it's very easy to kind of play the role of victim when all of this hit. And just real quick, just kind of touch on, like, 2020 sucked for everybody. There's not anyone out there that hasn't been impacted with the suckiness of 2020. And so you can either play the role of, hey, I'm a victim, this happened to me, or you can start to say to yourself, this did happen, but what am I going to do to change it? What actions can I take to start getting better and doing something different? And you start to shift that locus of control from external to internal. Well, good things start to happen because then you start to develop some hope because you know what you do matters. And if you change some actions, that will have some impact. Whether that's good or bad is going to depend on what you do. But again, just knowing that things that you can do will have an impact, I think starts to give people hope. You probably start to become a little bit more optimistic. And again, it's like you just get a little bit of that positive momentum going. And then it sort of starts to build and you get a little bit more self-confidence. And then it can quickly snowball from there and you start getting even more and more confident. And then, lo and behold, a couple months from now, whatever, a year from now, if you really kind of dedicate yourself, you can be a totally different person. So I think that's pretty key to me, is just kind of that shift in mindset that, what you do actually can make a difference. So sort of no matter what has happened to
So, Nick, I can't believe I'm saying it, yet I'm hearing you say, do the work.
you. Yeah, totally. Well, at the end of the day, that's really the foundation of everything, is doing the work. Like, there's no way around it. Like, no matter what, health, fitness, business, sales, whatever, you go down the line, you got to do the work eventually. There's literally no way around it. So again, people trying to find that magic shortcut or whatever, sorry, man, it doesn't exist. So again,
So it doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, Amazon has killed us with the, same hour delivery, it seems, or delivered to your door before you've even clicked order it. Yet all these quick they're not working. I mean, we've talked about before, there's no such thing as an overnight success. These are people that just maybe became overnight media successes because someone finally recognized them, or the product finally hit the market, or whatever it is. Yet it's something that someone's always been working on forever. It's doing the work.
Totally. I mean, I could 100% vouch for that as well. Think about how many years before we even had a digital product or anything, where people probably didn't even really know who we were. And then all of a sudden, with social media, things can sort of rise and snowball pretty quickly. People are like, oh, like, you guys kind of came out of nowhere. That's not the case. Like, we worked and did lots of nothing and struggled and all that. Like, everyone, that happens for everybody. It's sort of these false allures of magic and all that, because especially now with social media, that's all you see, right? You only see the highlight reels. Like, folks, people are sucking big time in the background, but no one's going to show that. No one wants to show that on social media.
They don't? Why not?
Yeah.
Why don't they show that sometimes? It says, my life sucks today and I'm having a bad day. I mean, we're having them. Why aren't we showing that kind of stuff?
I don't know the answer. I have an interesting idea that I'll float out there. People, again, we want to show our highlight reels. We want everyone to think that, we're in a much better position than we might actually be. And you can do that if again, going back to fitness, like, think about these ridiculous filtered photos that people can use. And it's just like, well, you don't really look like that. Come on. And then
Yeah, can somebody make the 20 pounds less filter? That's the one I'm looking for, right? Not just the certain light, but I want like just it flat out takes 20 pounds off me.
I, I got to be honest. I think that probably exists. I don't know what it is, but I think that probably exists. Like, I'm pretty sure that's some type of filter that you can use and different angles and lighting. Like, stuff's crazy, man. It's really crazy.
I mean, Nick, just talking about it, and I just put you on the spot with that question, of course, but I mean, just thinking about it, I mean, I love baseball. That was my sport growing up. And if you hit the ball one out of every three times, and people have heard this in every analogy, right? You're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Which means you missed two out of three times, which means you had a bad day two out of those 3 days. Yet if you have a great day one out of every 3 days, you can be a Hall of Famer. If you talked about, Michael Jordan, we talked about him just before we started recording. And I mean, and with The Last Dance that so many people have watched and the story of Mike, he didn't make every shot. It's just not possible. He just made some great shots in great locations and in great times and great situations to become Michael. And he's fantastic. And he's, in my opinion, the greatest of all time. When it comes to it, I'll have that argument with people. Yet there are still plenty of times Michael missed the shot.
I'm
And
pretty
we see
sure.
those. You could be sure ESPN showed us when he missed them.
Yeah, totally. That's another thing. There's so much failure out there, and so I'm actually essentially at the start of coronavirus. I had all these ideas in my head, and kind of just 2020 just sucked for everyone. Long story short, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer as well in January, so we kind of had that to deal with all year. So it's just like this
Sorry.
extra. Yeah, totally. And she's actually, I mean, she's so remarkable that so she's officially done with treatment now. She absolutely crushed. Yeah, totally. She's a rock star, man. I actually don't know how she did it. And in the middle of this, we're having to deal with coronavirus and stay-at-home orders and quarantine and having to homeschool our kids. We've got two small kids in second grade and kindergarten. My wife's having to do all this, and she's having to go to treatment and stuff all by herself, right? Like I'm not even allowed in the building. But again, kind of long story short, so she's crushed all of this. She's doing great. She's a warrior. But I basically sat down and I had this idea. I had all these ideas in my head, and it's just funny because you keep touching on them all too, and it's no coincidence. Like there's a lot of traits that successful people have in common, and so I basically started listing them out because I'd been reading tons and sort of just through my own trials and errors, of course, of doing our own business. I set out to write down all this and create a book, and so I did. And it's like, well, failure is one of these things. And it is one of these things that successful people 100% have to deal with. There's no such thing as a successful person that has not failed at some point. That person doesn't exist. You're going to stumble. Again, it goes back to the idea that we're all humans. I wish.
Folks, I want you to hear that. Right? Hear that. We're all human. And of course, failure is something that is expected if you're going to be a success. Right? I consider failure is when you actually stop. Like when you quit, that's failure. Otherwise, I've always told my daughter that it's just a lesson. Right? It's a how not to. Yet we're all going to have them. We're all going to run into those. We're all going to start with something, and then all of a sudden it's going to vanish. Okay, so Nick, failure, that's the one, right, that we just talked about. What else made this list that you've kind of put together that's the traits that you found that were all common?
Yeah, totally. So I started off with a list of probably like 10 or 11 things and trying to realize that some of them naturally combined into one another. And so I ended up with seven. And
Okay.
again, we've already talked about a lot of them. Like you just successful people just do all these things, whether they even know it or not. So again, work ethic, can't get around that. Most important one, literally builds the foundation of everything. Then you have the internal locus of control, and what you do matters.
Did you just
You,
say internal locus of
yeah,
control?
yes, sir. Yep.
Like not focus. You said locus.
Locus. Yep. Internal locus of control. Yep.
Okay, now you said that earlier, and I let it go past because I thought maybe I just heard that wrong. Um, I got to ask, what is that?
Sure. So internal locus of control. The idea is where is your locus of control? Is it external or internal? And external basically means that things happen to you. implying that like you're almost, if something bad happens, you're almost a victim. Whereas if you have an internal locus of control, well, what you do matters. Like, yes, something can happen to you, but you have sort of the choice to choose your response to it, right? Like COVID hits. That's an external factor. We can't really do anything about that. But what we can change is our, business strategy. We can change our sales strategy, whatever that is. We can change all that stuff. So that's sort of the idea of internal versus external locus of control. So again, successful people tend to have more of an internal one versus external.
Okay, so a locus of control, is it internal or is it external? Okay, we got the work ethic. We've got that. Keep going.
Positive mindset comes up next. So again, going back to just being optimistic, hopeful, really important. After that, discipline. I already covered that one for sure. And again, so all this stuff is really hard, and it helps to have this sort of bigger overall meaning or purpose. And if you know that, you have that, well, it all kind of starts to steer what you're doing. And I mean, I'm sure this comes up with you guys all the time. So if you, like, again, if you have essentially a calling with what you do, like you just love what you do, like you feel that you're just pretty much meant to be here and do this. Well, doing all of this hard work is a heck of a lot easier when you feel that way versus, if you're just working a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, failure. No matter who you are, there's obstacles, there are failures. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall down along the way. But it's kind of knowing that going in, because a lot of people think that they're like, oh, I don't want to get started, my own thing or whatever, because I might fail. Well, guess what? Everyone's probably going to fail a little bit. Now, again, there's different ways around that, of course. Failing smaller versus failing bigger. But again, everyone's going to fail. They're going to stumble at some point along the way. So if you know that going in, again, I think it helps alleviate getting over that initial hurdle that a lot of people have in starting their own business, going out on their own, whatever it is. And then the last one is just the idea of basically recharging. So combine some things into there and sort of this, making sure you handle stress and get enough sleep and what you eat, of course, that all plays a role into how much energy you're going to have to do things. And, and part of this recharge is also just the idea of, working on bettering yourself. So again, whether it's fitness, whether it's reading, self-improvement, all that stuff kind of falls under that umbrella.
Got it. That's a powerful list right there. Now, Nick, I promised everybody if they kept listening, we'd give them a tip or two other than just give up soda and stop eating at places where you order from a clown, right? Give me a tip or two for the general person that's listening to our podcast. Not necessarily, some people might be like, well, that was obvious. I knew that one. Some people, it might be a great start for them. Give us a hint or two in the nutrition world that you would just give away to someone and say, folks, just do this and then call me in 3 months when you know that it's working and we can get into detail.
Sure. It can keep it real simple here. So when it comes to exercising, do things that you like. Simple. So people think that they, need to go to the gym and, run on a treadmill or whatever. Couldn't be further from the truth. What if you hate the treadmill? I'm not going to tell you to run on the treadmill if you hate it. That's a recipe for disaster. What if you like going to yoga classes or fitness classes, whatever it is? You like doing CrossFit, etc. You just like going to the gym and pumping some iron. Great. Just do what you like. Something's better than nothing, 100%. On the nutrition side of things, it really comes down to as simple as just trying to eat higher quality foods. This doesn't mean superfoods. Superfoods really don't exist. Sorry to burst bubbles there. So again, if you focus just on eating higher quality foods, if you really want to boil it down, try to cook more for yourself, or don't eat out a ton or buy stuff that's maybe packaged or whatever. So you start cooking more. You don't even have to cook. Maybe you can buy it if you do some meal prep companies, whatever. But again, ditch the junk, because here's the problem that really at the end of the day, nutrition comes down to. It's a calorie balance problem. So people get into trouble when they start eating too many calories. And this is really easy to do because what do people like to eat? Delicious tasting foods. What is in most of these delicious tasting foods? Well, lots of sugar, lots of fat, things that make it taste really well. That's by design, right? People want to sell delicious tasting food, right? All the businesses out there. So again, if you can, and I'm going to give you an example. So let's say a Snickers bar is like 300 calories. So what's going to fill you up more, that Snickers bar or a plate of, lean proteins, veggies, and rice? So you can have a whole entire plate of these higher quality foods. So let's call it 300 calories versus a Snickers bar, 300 calories. Well, which one's going to fill you up more? Which one's going to not have you craving more food in an hour, right? Like, it's easy.
But according to the commercials, Snickers fill me up, right? I mean, they satisfy me.
Yeah, well,
they sold me on this on the ad, right? It must be the Snickers bar is the answer to the question.
Yeah, totally. Well, okay, so we'll use Butterfingers, right? We'll use that as an example then. But it's kind of just the same idea, really.
Of course.
If you eat higher quality foods, it is really hard to overeat calories. And when you overeat calories, you start to gain weight. When you start to gain weight and put on extra fat, that's when you start to get into a lot of health issues. And that has been pretty well substantiated with coronavirus. People that have medical conditions tend to be the ones that are struggling more so than others. Of course, with older folks as well. But, again, you can just alleviate a lot of that by eating healthy, being active. Doesn't have to be super crazy.
Yeah, and watch that label on the side of the box, because not everybody should be eating a 2,000 calorie diet. Some people need more than that on their output. Some people need less than that. Yet on the side of every box, it always seems to be that it's a 2,000 calorie diet. And in our head, we think that that's the number we should be shooting for every day.
Totally. It's almost as if you need sort of an AI coach in your pocket to help tell you how much and what to eat. It's almost
all right. Sales pitch time then, as we're here at the end of the call. So Nick, give everybody, if they wanted to get their hands on the app, or they wanted to find more, or they wanted to follow up or connect with you, how, where, what do they do? Because they can't spell Renaissance Periodization probably. So how do they get to all of this stuff?
Totally. RP Strength. If you're on Instagram, follow RP Strength on there. Lots of cool, kind of motivating, inspiring stuff, some educational stuff as well. So that's a really good start. I will preface this with, if you kind of know what you're doing with dieting and you sort of are familiar with the idea of counting macros, real quick, that's just like how many proteins, carbs, and fats you're eating for a day. Totally check out our app. If you don't know what a macro is and you're like, does that mean macroeconomics? Okay, if you're one of those folks, totally cool. I totally get it. Don't hop into the app. Go to rpstrength.com. Check out our simple diet templates. They are designed for people that don't even know what a macro is. You don't really have to know anything fancy. And they're just designed to get people eating healthier. And it's going to help you lay out sort of how much you need to eat. And that's it. And that's the best spot to get started.
All right. So gang, hopefully you got some business tips. Hopefully you got some mindset tips. Hopefully you definitely got some health and fitness tips as we went through this conversation. And we look forward to seeing what you're going to do with this stuff. Okay. Make sure you follow us on Facebook or on Instagram. You can find us on Instagram at Win Make Give, because we want to see your before and after photos, whether that's your business from before and after, or whether that's your health from before and after. Make sure you're sharing that stuff with us as well. Make sure you're sharing this episode with someone that needs to hear the message. Do the work that Nick shared with us today. Nick, we really appreciate you coming on. We really appreciate you sharing. We look forward to all of the after photos that you're going to be able to help people achieve. Folks, until our next episode, make sure that you wash those hands, and as always, do good.